Okay, everybody, thank you for coming to this month's tech panel. This is a special edition tech panel. We're talking about how to roll your own BadgeKit, how to take the open source freely available software that makes up BadgeKit.org and put it on your own servers. There's also it's also possible to host this on a couple of different platform as a service sites, including Heroku. We, Mozilla, are hosting BadgeKit.org on Amazon EC2, so it's also pretty easy to host there. And we'll get into some of the details. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to do everything locally on my own machine as a way to demonstrate just the basics of setting things up. I think that it'll still be indicative of what it takes to set this up on a server out there in the world. I run Ubuntu Linux on my my desktop, my laptop, so it's pretty similar to what a standard server setup would be like. If anybody has any questions, please add them to the Etherpad, and we'll try to do some rounds of question and answer as we go. If you're watching this on video after the fact, you can feel free to join either the OpenBadges mailing list and ask questions there, or you can email OpenBadges at mozillafoundation.org. I think is our support email. If that's incorrect, I'll correct it when we post this to YouTube. Okay, so everybody's looking at my my window right now. This is the URL for the Etherpad. If you're just joining, I believe that the Etherpad will still be after we post this live. So I'm doing all of my work inside of Emacs, which is just a text editor, and right now I'm opening up a shell. So here's what we've got. Is that big enough? Maybe I'll just make it a little bit bigger. Okay. I created a directory called ryo-badgekit for roll your own BadgeKit, and inside of it I checked out the two projects that we're interested in right now. They're both hosted on GitHub. I'm going to switch what I'm sharing for a second. The two projects are OpenBadges BadgeKit and BadgeKit API. They're both under Mozilla. Both of them are released under the Mozilla public license, so you can download them, you can fork them, you can do all the work that you need to. And what we're going to do today is install both of these things and get them talking to one another. So in order to kind of explain what that means, I drew this convenient, highly sophisticated picture. The cloud is the internet. This black box is BadgeKit, which in Mozilla sense would be badgekit.org, but in ours it's going to run on our local machine. BadgeKit talks to a database. Then we have a separate instance that's the BadgeKit API that also talks to a database. And you'll notice that there's no lines connecting these things directly. Everything is happening through the magic of the internet. And that's really just to point out that we do have two separate server instances here. We've got a set of tools, including its own database, that's badgekit.org, and then we have a set of tools over here that in production we're hosting at api.badgekit.org. And so we'll set up both of these things, and I'll show you how to interconnect them so that they can talk to one another. And it's interesting, but this is maybe a little esoteric, but You could conceivably just install the API if you wanted to. You can do the API on its own, but you can't do BadgeKit on its own. In order to have BadgeKit work, it needs the API. But if you wanted to, if you were like super ambitious, you could conceivably not install BadgeKit, just install the API and build a whole bunch of services on top of the API. So let's go back to my screen. And talk a little bit about the things that you need to do. So oops. So I set this up ahead of time, kind of like Julia Childs. But we're going to start with the API because, like I said a minute ago, you need to set up the BadgeKit needs the API to exist and not vice versa. So the API code I checked out of GitHub, just like git clone and then the URL that I got from GitHub. I'm assuming a certain level of knowledge on the call. Like if it turns out that things are confusing, feel free to ask them in the Etherpad and we'll do our best to help you out. But I'm assuming that a couple things. One, that you're familiar with GitHub. Two, that you're familiar with some basic server terminology and Linux command line usage. And three, that you got at least a passing knowledge of Node. All of this stuff is written in JavaScript using the Node.js framework. And in most cases specifically Express as a web framework. So I went ahead and I cloned this this afternoon. You can see it's coming from GitHub, and inside of this repo there's a schema.sql. This is the MySQL schema for this. For the BadgeKit API. So also earlier in the day, but actually, you know what, I'll start from, well, I'm not going to lie, I set this up ahead of time. So everybody, if anybody wants to hack my local machine, the password for my MySQL instance is DB. It's not super secret. Inside of here, I've got a database called BadgeKit API. And inside of that are a bunch of tables. And I got those tables, in this case, by doing the fancy right? I took the schema.sql that's in the project and I loaded it into the database, which is a pretty standard MySQL sort of thing to do. Now, so that's all you need to do to set up the database. Set up the application. It's a little bit more complicated. It's not much more complicated than what we just did to set up the MySQL database, but it requires talking about something that is kind of a standard deal that we do in the OpenBadges team nowadays, but it can sometimes freak out people. So give me a second to change my window. It's called the 12-factor app. It's a manifesto sort of on what it means to run a modern application. It was originally written by a bunch of people at Heroku, which is one of our favorite platform as a service offerings. And it's a really, really good doc. It's about 40, 50 pages. It's not very long. And it gives a bunch of suggestions, 12 suggestions specifically, of what you need to do to run an application. And we follow it almost to the letter. And the thing that people a lot of times don't understand when they first start working with the 12-factor app is that it's a set of rules that say that you can run on any platform as a service. You can run it in the cloud, on Amazon, on Heroku, wherever, and it's real easy to spin up multiple instances of an app in a hurry. But the requirements are sometimes kind of weird. So there are things like you can't write to a file system, right? Because if you wrote to a file system on a cloud server, and then that instance went down, including the file system, how would you know that file system could be preserved? You wouldn't, right? So there's things sort of like that. Like you put a lot of data into the database. You don't rely on local file systems. And one of the other ones that kind of throws people off a lot is that configuration is typically done through environment variables, and they're not done. So like within the runtime environment, in the environment, the actual runtime environment is where you store those configuration variables, which makes it really easy to have configurations that are meant for staging versus production without having to get into juggling different files around. So I'm not going to get into any more detail on the 12-factor app, but I would encourage everybody to read it if you haven't seen it before, because it'll be clearer why we made some of the decisions that we did and how we set up the app. So to that end, I'm also going to use a utility called Foreman, which is a development server application by the Heroku people that will read environment variables from a special file for development purposes, and it also gives you the ability to push those configurations up to a Heroku instance. So it makes it really easy to go back and forth between your local environment and your remote environment. So what I'm building up to is that inside of BadgeKit.api, I created a file called .env, and inside of it is where I'm configuring all of my configuration for this instance of the BadgeKit API. And the things that I'm setting here are documented in GitHub, but they're fairly basic, right? Like you can see the first 4 bits here are all about what database to connect to. Got the host, the database name, which is BadgeKit API, the password is DB, and the user is root. And then the only thing that's a little bit weird is this master secret. So remember in our picture, these guys are not talking to each other directly. Like BadgeKit is not talking to BadgeKit API's database directly. So the two services need a way of authenticating one another through the internet. And the way that we're doing that is with shared secrets. So we're digitally signing the requests that go between the services with a shared secret. And in this case, the shared secret is the word Chris. Don't tell anybody. If anybody's on my local machine, that's the secret, is Chris. So now that I've set that up, so remember, I created a database, I configured my environment, and then I can just say Foreman start. And lo and behold, we have an instance of the BadgeKit API up and running. So I'm not going to lie to you. It took me 15 minutes of real time to get that set up. It took me longer to explain it to you guys than it did to get it set up. So I did it in advance just in case anything was weird, but it was pretty quick. So now that we've got, oh wait, I missed a step. Hey, I missed a step. And that was because I had set this up previously. So Node has a requirements file called package.json. If you look in here, like there's a bunch of dependencies. So in this case, dependencies are MySQL and StreamSQL and Restify, a bunch of stuff like that. You have to install those dependencies, and you do that by saying npm install. And nothing, well actually here. It installs everything in a directory called node modules, which I'm removing. So if I were to start now, foreman start, throws errors because I don't have the dependencies. So to install those dependencies, I say npm install, and you'll see a bunch of stuff go whizzing by. And we're done, and then I can say foreman start. There we go. So I apologize, I missed a step. Install the database and the schema, install module or application dependencies, and then you can start it up. And so that's running on port 5000. If I wanted to, I could change the port through one of the configuration variables. It's just port equals. I could say port equals 8000, and it would run on 8000. Now that we've got the API set up, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, so I'm using a terminal program that has three tabs. This was BadgeKit API. Over here I've got the BadgeKit front end, and then in this window I've got my my text editor if we need it. But here I'm in the BadgeKit front end, and it's almost exactly the same process. There's one variation in it, though. I went ahead and created a database. It has tables right now, but you know, just for completeness, I'm going to drop it because this one is a tiny bit more complicated. Now I'm creating the database, calling it BadgeKit. And in the BadgeKit front end, we've got database migrations. And the reason was because the schema kept changing, so we added the ability to migrate the database schema without necessarily dropping everything and recreating it from scratch. So it also unfortunately it means that so I'm going to run a command. It's called db migrate, and then I'm going to tell it up, right? So I'm saying take the database, add all the tables that you need to. And so it's running through and processing those migrations. And then if I were to go back into the database, I could see that all the tables are there. The thing that's a little bit weird is you might be asking yourself, like, how does it know what database to connect to? So in order for that to work, you do have to set up your configuration ahead of time, and it has to be in your either in your environment variables or in a local file. So the majority of the engineers on the OpenBadges team do set it up on a local file. I have a tendency to load things into my environment. I would say you can consult the documentation a little bit to talk through, to figure out what makes sense for you, both locally developing and also in your production environment or staging environment. But for me, what I did was I created a file called env local, and then these are just conventional bash environment variables, and then I source that file by saying // env local. Okay, which is, it's different than that .env that we were talking about before, because the .env is a foreman-specific configuration setup. So I know that that's a little bit confusing, but we can definitely circle back on it and talk about it a little bit more. You'll get used to it if you start working with Heroku, which I definitely recommend. I really like Heroku. Okay, so anyways, we have the database, and so now just like with I just removed node modules just like we did before, but just like with the BadgeKit API, now we need to install all the dependencies, and it's just npm install. Okay, so all the dependencies are set up, and then just like with BadgeKit API, we look at the env file. So this one's a little bit different. We start off with this cookie secret. Because there's going to be end users here, we're going to be they're going to store. There's going to be a cookie in their client that has some encrypted data in it. So we need to give the server a secret to use to encrypt the data in that cookie. This should be secret. You don't want this to get out. And in my case, it's Chris is super cool, which is both a convenient secret and true. Then we get the port, which is pretty conventional, the port that it's going to run on. Then here it gets a little strange, right? We have this thing called an OpenBadger URL. So OpenBadger is a legacy term. It's what we were calling BadgeKit before it was BadgeKit. So BadgeKit, OpenBadger URL is the URL of the API that we just built. So in our case, it's at http://localhost running on port 5000. In production, it would be something entirely different. It would be like in the case of badgekit.org, that location is https://api.badgekit.org. And then OpenBadger secret. Now remember, when we did the API, we created that master password. That's the OpenBadger secret. So they match. We set it to Chris over there. We're setting it to Chris here. They just have different names. And then all of this database configuration stuff is sort of self-explanatory. We're using MySQL. The host is localhost. The user is root. The password is DB. And the database is BadgeKit. We're using Persona for people to log in. Oh, you know what? It's probably a little bit hard to see because is my name blocking out the bottom of the page? Okay, well, just in case. We're using Persona for login to BadgeKit. So one requirement of Persona is that you're explicit about the URL that the service is running on, so that people can't fake the location of the login. I'm probably explaining that wrong. But basically, this Persona audience needs to match exactly the URL that this thing is going to be served on. So for instance, if it was badgekit.org, then that thing would need to say badgekit.org, right? https://badgekit.org. So this access list is, I don't know how long this is going to live. I'm going to be totally honest with you. But for right now, you can add patterns into this array that anybody that matches that regular expression pattern has an account on BadgeKit. We also have it all set up through the database too. But if you wanted to, like if you had just like if you wanted to let everybody in your organization have access, you could set up a rule in here that said like everybody at gmail.com could just automatically has an account. Wouldn't recommend that, but it is possible. But it's convenient for testing because you can just put in chris.mcavoy@gmail.com, and I'll show you in a second. I can log in as chris.mcavoy@gmail.com without extra configuration or adding myself to the database. And then lastly, so this OpenBadger system equals BadgeKit. It's possible for BadgeKit in its current form to talk to legacy instances of OpenBadger. So this last environment variable just says, in terms of the API, we're talking to modern BadgeKit. Eventually, we might get to the point where we also need to version this, but for now, it's just BadgeKit or I think OpenBadger. So that's the configuration, and then we form and start. And now it says it's listening on port 3000. So I go over here. Change the window. Oh shoot, I was already logged in. So yeah, I go to 3000 and whammo, we've got an instance of BadgeKit that's talking to also our local instance of the API. I can go ahead and log in. Oh, and when I click login, you can't see it, but a little a persona pop-up window is happening. I'm logging in as chris.mcavoy@gmail.com, and there you go. I've got an account. I can do everything that I could do if I was in the private beta on badgekit.org, but I'm doing it locally. And then to the same extent I can do, if I put this all up on my own servers, I've got a running instance of BadgeKit. Including all of the webhooks and API access and all of the bits and pieces that make up the badgekit.org version of BadgeKit. There's no difference. And so really, like in just about 20 minutes locally, we set that up. So it's pretty easy. And just to give you a taste of one place that you could, just to talk a little bit about Heroku, the only difference between what I just did locally and running it on Heroku is so this installation of OpenBadges BadgeKit again is on my local machine, but it's configured to push to a Heroku instance of BadgeKit that we sometimes use for staging. And so I can run commands like show me all of the logs for the remote one. I just said Heroku logs, and it shows me all of the stuff that's running remotely on the Heroku server. I can get a status of the servers that so we've just got one web server running. So because of the way I've got this one sized, that it's only using a single instance of Heroku, it's actually free, and it has a free instance of MySQL on there too. So you could today get all of this running in a place that's publicly accessible to at least your team. I mean, it would be relatively small, but you could get an instance of BadgeKit up and running in, I'd say, an hour, maybe two, if you're new to Heroku, maybe a day if you're new to Heroku. But you could get an instance up for minimal or no cost, and start playing around with it in your world. And frankly, like, you can build production systems on top of it at that point. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to look at the Etherpad and just see if questions were coming up. But otherwise, that was the presentation, and I'd like to just reserve the rest of the time for people to ask questions. So let me pull up the Etherpad. Yep. So on line 93 of the Etherpad, will the installation steps be written down somewhere? Yeah. So Sue is is the technical writer on the BadgeKit project, as well as some other stuff. And she and I are working on getting this all written down. So part of this tech panel was also me validating the instructions that I said out loud. How do BadgeKit API and BadgeKit interact with the OpenBadges backpack? So that's a really good question, and there's a piece of all of this that I wasn't planning on covering because it's probably its own topic, is to say that if you have your own instance of BadgeKit up and running, how do you actually start issuing badges? And so one of the underlying principles of BadgeKit is that we want it to integrate with your site seamlessly. Like we don't want the people that are earning your badges to know that they're coming from BadgeKit. We want them to come from you. So one of the requirements at this point, at this stage in development, is that you build a front-end website that interacts with the BadgeKit API to list the badges, allow people to apply for them, all of that stuff. So, so there's an additional piece on top of all of this that you also really need to build a front-end website. And the plan is to build some demo sites soon that'll help people jumpstart that process. We're still definitely solidly in beta for a lot of this stuff, but as we get more examples of this running in production, I think everybody will benefit from it. Yep. Can we remove the private beta restriction on our own deployment so a user doesn't get redirected to the private beta sign-up form? Yeah, so Eric Christensen is one of the engineers on the team. He's releasing tools to make it easy to add users to your instance here in the next day. So that little bit that I showed where I added chris.mcavoy@gmail.com in the environment variables is just a way to get started. But once you're actually in the system, you can add as many users as you want. And at that point, you're not technically in private beta. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but yeah, you can tweak it as much as you want to allow whoever you want to sign up on your system. Is there a place that we can get a walkthrough of the current feature set in BadgeKit? So it wasn't a tech talk, but we did have a couple of webinars, and I don't know if any more are planned, but oh, and there is a recording. Yep. So look to the link on 106 when it comes. Also, is there a BadgeKit roadmap for planned future features? Yes, there is, but it's not published anywhere yet. So it will be soon, and we'll distribute that around. Yep. So did you the writer in light green, if you've got some features that you're interested in particular, feel free to list them there, and I can talk about them if I know, and if not, we'll publish that roadmap soon. Is this designed to use OAuth 2 with the Google API? No, it's not currently. Are there plans to package BadgeKit as a community Amazon machine image? There aren't currently, but I don't see why we couldn't do that. I don't know if JP is on the call. So JP Schneider is the DevOps guru of the Mozilla Foundation, and he loves doing that kind of stuff. So there's a precedent for us distributing not necessarily AMI images, but the tools to build the AMI images. So we've messed around with Docker and some other tools that will get you an environment up and running really fast. Are there plans to package BadgeKit as, are we still integrating with Apply and Reward platform, Estemia? Oh, so in BadgeKit now, we're moving all of the Estemia functionality into BadgeKit. And so in the instance, there's a bit up there that talks about applications and review. That's the Estemia functionality. So it's not It's not live, but it will be soon. Okay, so the features. Tagging of badges, multiple tags on each badge. We do have that currently. Like you can add tags to the badge. Oh, there's a link to the roadmap on line 11, which is awesome. Ability to deliver badges to end users. So 13, ability to deliver badges to end users. I think we need to hold off until we publish the roadmap to have that discussion, because we want to make it easier for people to get up and running on BadgeKit in a hurry. But how that plays out in terms of the actual product is something that probably has its own discussion. Ability to create badge workflows, get this badge, then this badge. Yes, so that does exist currently. We're referring to those as milestone badges, so you can create a milestone badge that has other badges as a prerequisite. And suggested badges, not from BadgeKit, at least not yet, but there's a bunch of projects going on right now that can index badge systems and make recommendations based on different criteria. So look for more about that in the future. Can you share the process to keep our BadgeKit instance up to date? Yeah, so how to keep it up to date. So everything that I would say, just in terms of like GitHub etiquette, we follow like standard operating procedures around releases. So nothing that we put into production gets there unless it's been tagged as a release. So you can keep an eye on the releases in GitHub and then update it as you see fit. I wouldn't run. I think you'd be safe just running master. In fact, like my development environment that I just set up here was all based on master. So it's not dangerous, but I would say if you ran from the tags, you're probably better off. And then for the database schema, so we are using migrations in that BadgeKit front end. So I think that's one way to do it. I mean, we'll continue to use database migrations, and I'm guessing we'll convert API to use the migrations in the near future. In case we would like to customize the BadgeKit instance, yeah, that one's always that's going to be a little trickier. I'm not sure what to do about that one. Like if you start working off of a fork, you'll be responsible for pulling any changes that happen in the main repository into your fork. Yeah. So, oh, good. Okay. Line 123. Where can we find documentation about using the BadgeKit API? And the link is there. Yep. Is the private beta updated with a nightly build on GitHub? Not automatically. We only update the private beta when we have a release. So right now we're on pace of releasing something or other every other day or so. Would it be okay to remove the BadgeKit branding, the logo and header, while we're integrating with our app? I don't know. We're released under the Mozilla public license, so and I'm not a lawyer, but my guess is probably, but I don't know what the restrictions are on the license that we've released it under. Cool. I don't see any other questions. We have 10 minutes left. If anybody wants to ask a question with their words, that's fine too. So yeah, I mean, line 33, we'll definitely get, or 133, happy to get back to everybody on the on the question of whether or not you can rebrand it, but I'd say just consult the Mozilla public license. I'd almost rather people make their own judgment on based on the terms rather than us interpreting them, but because they are attached to the app. Oh, is the OpenBadges specification nailed down? Yeah, it is nailed down. I mean, it will change, but at this point we've committed to it always being backward compatible. So we went 1.0 a year ago, and we've committed to not breaking that 1.0 commitment. Okay, folks, I don't see new stuff popping up, so I'm going to say thank you very much for everybody for attending. Please join the OpenBadges mailing list when you have a chance, and also look for the OpenBadges-dev mailing list, where you can ask some more in-depth technical questions. I'm really, really excited for all of you to set up your own instance of this and start kicking the tires and start issuing badges and really working with it. We're committed to open source, and we want people to use this as much as we want people to use BadgeKit.org. So thanks everybody for coming. Anybody has any questions, feel free to email the list, get in touch with us. But otherwise,
real quickly,
Nate
just asked when the video will be posted. We will be posting it to the mailing list as soon as it's ready.
Yep. Cool.
There's also another question coming in towards the bottom of the tab.
Oh, it would be nice to know more about how to integrate with the OpenBadges backpack in our own front-end website. I totally agree. I'd like to suggest that we make that an upcoming tech panel. I think that we have something slated for 2 weeks from now, but we could either, if that's not the case, then we could do it at that tech panel, and if it is the case that something's already on deck for that panel, we could do another special one. But I agree. I'd like to make it as clear as possible. So now, given if you've set this thing up for yourself, what's the real next step? Like, how do you integrate it with your website? I think is a great topic for a panel. Okay, cool. And I think we're okay. Am I missing anything? All right, awesome. Everybody, thanks again. I really appreciate your time. Good luck getting set up.